Welcome to the Right to Reason podcast. I'm your host, Robert Stanley. Today, Luke Larsen will argue that holographic theory defends the existence of God. Ben Fama Jr. is seeking the truth, but he won't back down to bullshit.
It's the Right to Reason podcast.
Under chairs, I've looked under tables, I try to find the key to 50 million fables. They call me the seeker. I've been searching low and high. I won't get what I'm after till the day I die.
This episode of the Right to Reason podcast is brought to you by our patrons and contributors like me. We have all recognized the value of the unrestrained marketplace of ideas and have decided to make a difference. You can make a difference too. Contribute at patreon.com/right and learn more about your right to reason at therighttoreason.com. Your activism is appreciated.
Our old friend Luke Larsen and Ben Fama Jr. Gentlemen, how are you?
What's up, man? Thanks for having us again.
Everybody,
excited to be back.
Absolutely. Everybody should already know this, but check out Reasons to Believe and a Virus Called Fear. That's on Ben Fama Jr. That's the name of the channel, right? Ben Fama Jr.?
Yeah, on YouTube or benfamajr.com, or you can just go to Amazon, type in Reasons to Believe, or my name, and you can find all my films there. So,
yeah, there's other films also. I know those two are badass. And I want to direct everybody to Ben Fama's podcast. What's the name of that podcast? What's it about, sir? It just came out. Is that correct?
yeah, it's the Ben Fama Jr. Show. We air every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find it on my YouTube channel, and or you can go to benfamajr.com. I got all the links and stuff there. We talk about psychology. We talk about politics, culture. We just do interviews. It's a pretty laid-back show. It's kind of like, an interview talk show, but I'm trying to not just do politics all the time, too. I'm trying to actually make it a little bit more broader. So I've been really enjoying it, so...
That's awesome. I'm glad you're back, man. I remember I used to watch Reality Trip with Ben Fama all the time, so that's cool. But that was more like politics. Whereas this one,
and this will still be it, but it just won't be as much. Like, I'm trying to broaden it a little bit, to have it like a more appeal to more just diverse stuff of what I like. Talking to musicians, talking to other filmmakers. Just to all broad. I'm gonna bring you on too at some point, Robert, and we're gonna have a really cool conversation. So
yeah, we always get down.
Check that out.
Luke, we're ignoring you, man. You want to kick us off, Luke? You don't have anything to plug, do you?
No, nothing new.
Everything that Ben was just talking about, guys, you will find in the show notes today. Luke, you're here to prove to Ben that God exists. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that it's more reasonable to be a theist than atheist.
More reasonable. Okay. So you're not going to say per se that you have like solid evidence or something like that, but you do have reasonable arguments that would say he probably should be a Christian, or at least a theist.
Well, yeah, because when it comes down to things, no one's 100% sure about anything, really. So you go based on reason. You look at the evidence, and you look at where does things lean, right? No one's 100% a theist or atheist. If you say that, then you're not really honest with yourself. So that's kind of my stance. Is like, okay, follow the evidence. Where should you go?
Ben, doesn't that sound kind of like that street epistemology kind of thing, where you get them at like, what percent are you at, and then you try to make them question one thing, and then you ask them the percent again, and then if it came down at all, you're like, there, you're a little less of a Christian now. Like, that's sounds like a reverse. It's
kind of funny because when I hear people say, like, well, no one's 100% atheist or no one's 100% theist, I'm like, well, but if we're going to use that same logic, we could say the same thing about, well, I can't 100% not prove that there's unicorns, or I can't 100% prove there's leprechaun. Like, it really doesn't help like the conversation in the end, because there's lots of things we don't know if we can actually prove that could exist somewhere, even on another planet right now. I mean, so I understand the logic in the argument, but I also think, like for me, I'm highly, highly, highly confident that there isn't at least a God to what has been written in books or been mentioned, if there even is one, or I don't even see a need to even have one. So, but I'm interested in the conversation. I'd like to hear what Luke said, he's got to say about it. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, like that's the same kind of thing with me where, yeah, okay, for all intents and purposes, I'm believe there's a God, right? And the Christian God. But I always like to learn other people's perspectives because it keeps it interesting and you can see and actually kind of relate with them. Like, okay, I get where you're coming from and we can continue different conversations, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So what do you got, Luke? Why should Ben believe you?
Well, actually, something recently that I've been looking into a lot more is like argument from consciousness, right? And the idea, like, I'm big into like looking into philosophy as well, and I found some interesting things. Do you know what the holographic principle is? This one's in physics.
I've heard of it, but I don't think I'm 100% familiar. You can let me know what it is.
Yeah, I never heard of that one either.
Basically, the premise is that everything like doesn't start and is contingent on time and space. Really, those things are emergent properties of something else, like a kind of a two-dimensional information, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been getting a little bit more widespread in the physics community, but basically they started off with looking at black holes and trying to solve that the information loss problem, right? If you've heard of that one.
Yeah. I think I actually know what theory you're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so as I've been looking through this, it's been super interesting seeing how, like, it just coincides with my theistic beliefs on, okay, like before there was space and time, it's not like there was nothingness. There was information. There was a mind. There was something there. And the more I look into it, and the more consequences it has on our universe and with like quantum entanglement and things like that, it's been super interesting. How much do you think you'd say you know about it, like if we start talking about it?
I'm actually familiar with it. I wouldn't say that I'm a scientist where I can break down every single, thing about it, but I'm familiar with it. I think there was a guy who, can't remember his name. I remember watching a show where he was trying to elaborate on Stephen Hawking's theory, and he broke it down more and talking about that. My understanding is that there's a plane or something of existence that's projecting everything from a certain point, kind of like a projection.
Yeah, like a hologram, right?
Yeah. So I've heard of the theory, and so what's your thoughts on what you think it's connected to, how it pertains to God? Because I would still, even in that argument, even say, even if that was a true case, that I still don't see a need for a God. But go ahead and give me your take on that.
Yeah, and before you do, Luke, can you explain it for me? Because I don't get it.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you know how in physics, lots of times they'll make a hypothetical world, and then they'll put a theory on there and see how that theory explains the world.
No, but go ahead.
No, okay. So there's some problems in physics where they're like, oh, we cannot describe these things in the world.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with physics doing that, but that's cool. I'm just wondering, like, what's the hologram thing and how does it connect?
Yeah. So the hologram premise is that the world is not fundamentally made from space and time. There's something before that, right? Space and time emerge from this thing. Like space and time were created, that idea. And what they're saying was even before then was simply information, like zeros and ones. So if you look at this information, from that, you would be able to make any 3D object. Okay, so like in a black hole, you know how if I threw a hat into a black hole, it would be completely ripped apart, right?
Okay.
And it'd be gone. The idea is that on the event horizon, which is like the face of the black hole, there's information on there, 2D information, where if I could take that out from the black hole, I could recreate that hat, right? So the information is not lost. Like I can recreate anything I throw into a black hole.
So it's like energy?
Well, to elaborate too, it's basically what I think it was Stephen Hawking originally was hypothesizing, saying that information cannot be lost in the universe at all. Mm-hmm. So if a black hole destroys, sucks in light, sucks in all this information or whatever, the information can't be destroyed. So where is the information? So basically the hypothesis, and I'm not an expert at this by any means, so please forgive me. But Leonard Susskind was the one who actually, so I would say look him up more to get a better understanding of it. But basically that information on the edge of a black hole, since it can't be destroyed, or something about it is being projected, and what we're seeing is the 3-dimensional version of the 2D information that's on this informational plane. Now, it still needs to be proven. These are our hypotheses, so I get it. But it is an interesting concept. So the question I have for you is that where do you think that actually connects to God? Because even in that instance, I don't think that actually proves an intelligent mind at all.
Oh, yeah, no, and that's like laying down the groundwork here. I'm laying down that even in physics and people that are spending their lives on it, I'm able to show you like you can follow a step to see, wow, hey, there is a space where like this idea of no space or no time, like in the Bible it says God created that. Well, now it's actually reasonable, right? What I'm trying to do here is take claims of Christianity or really any theistic belief and say, hey, it's not irrational, right? So I'm going to be starting off just making it so we can all say, you know what, hey, that's not totally crazy. You're not insane by saying God or something created space and time.
Yeah, but how are you going to get there? And we got, all respect going your way, brother, but we got 30 minutes, so.
Okay, yeah.
Let's hit him. Hit Ben with all you got.
Yes. Okay, so now that we've started off understanding that space and time are not necessary for the universe, I think we should, as agnostics, go from an agnostic point saying, hey, I don't believe that there is a God or there is not, so let's look at all the evidence given. I think through just how we operate, how we talk about we have free will and things like that, through just what would have started creating space and time, like even if we had the information, what caused it to explode into what we have now, and 3, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, that a theistic worldview is much more reasonable to believe in than an atheistic one.
But so help me understand this then. What makes it more plausible? I mean, where's the evidence to support that God would have actually had to even start any of this, and how did he start it?
Yeah, so with the idea of why is it plausible, or I would say more reasonable, right? Because I think I would say it makes sense where if you have information, let's say for eternity, there's been this eternity past, there's been information just sitting there. What caused it to be blown out into some 3D world, universe that we have now? Because there's no space, there's no moving of anything. It's just information. So
right.
What would have caused that to explode?
So that's the question I'm asking you is that how do you explain God doing that? How did he do that?
Well, okay,
and why did he do it?
Yes. Okay. So if we go on how God does things, I'm going to have to say I don't know how God operates from eternity past without prior things. Right? If there was a being out there who created everything, it means that he's all powerful. I don't think we have to get into this. I think you've looked into the philosophy of religion and philosophy of God. It's contingent that he is all powerful, all knowing, these kinds of things, right? Do we have to get into this?
Not necessarily, but I guess the question is if we don't actually know how he actually created it, why do you have confidence that he's the one that created it? Because I think that's where it stops for me, is saying, okay, well, he had to have a plan of action. There had to have been a blueprint. There had to have been a reason why he did what he did. Nothing adds up to any of the reasons, even if he was the one that created it. Because usually when I ask people, okay, well, how did he create it? They don't know any more than what I would know in general. And if there's things outside of space and time that can create entire universes, well, why does it require a God when we don't even? Why do you have the confidence in something that you don't know?
Well, okay, so if we're saying that, okay, how did these things come about? Well, if we're talking about the information, before space and time, there's information. What do you think that information is? The whole holographic principle is the idea that all these things were already there, already existent before space and time. It's just in the form of information.
Right, and if
so
it
that's
already,
how maybe
if it already existed, then why couldn't it already just existed with it as an information instead of it being God starting it?
Well, because the idea, so I believe God is a mind, so information. He is simply information that can act, that it rearranges things and all that. If there is no mind, if it's just mindless information, it doesn't choose to do anything. It can't choose to create itself. It can't move itself into some 3D universe. Something made it happen. If I have a ball that's just sitting there and no one pushes it and no one does anything, there's no wind, no nothing, it's not going to start moving unless that ball was conscious, and it figured out a way to work around things, right, and utilize something. Like, do you see where I'm coming from? Like something that is
what if
has no life in it.
What if Luke was asking it this way?
There needs to be a mind to do it, because there's many things in this universe that move without a mind making it happen.
But back then, there's no space or time. There's no physical bodies, right?
Okay, so if there's no space and time, then that means God couldn't even be moving. Because
no, God doesn't move. It's a mind. This is what I'm saying. There's no physical body. Like, I'm not saying.
But I'm just saying any change of state would create time. That means he went from one state to a different state, correct? There was no universe, and then there was. Mm-hmm. So what was he doing before that state? Was he just hovering in space and time? Was he coming up with thoughts? Anytime there's any change of a state, a change of a molecule, a change of quantum, that changes, and that is time. So there had to have been time even outside if God exists.
Yeah, well, if you look into this theory more, lots of things, like when they throw away space and time, like specifically on time, they're throwing away our concept of time, since it's so tied to space, right? Because, space, time are one, and like this is what we talk about in our universe.
Right.
But when you start looking into these kinds of things, it talks about there could be this different form of time back then. Like you said, like once someone does something, there's time now, because there's a before and there was an after, right?
Correct.
So when they come up with, like, when they've been coming up with this theory, they do accept that there is some form of time. It's just not the same as what we have now. It's not the same kind of time, and which is also in the Bible. The Bible even says, like, he says he created space, like, created all these things, but he also says that there is time where he is. It's just different. It works differently than here.
How is it different, and how do you measure it? So how do you know that?
Well, okay, then if we want, like, we'd have to get more into this holographic theory, because this is getting a lot into physics, and like you've said, I'm also not a physicist. So if we want, we'll meet up again, and we can get really in depth with how they've come up with this other time and how it works. But so far, what I'm saying is, according to these physicists, the experts in their field, it aligns with what also the Bible says, and works with very well with a theistic point of view, specifically Christian theism.
Unfortunately, it actually doesn't, because there's nothing in the Bible that even talks about physics in that matter. In fact, everything is backwards. There's, certain things are made before other things, well,
if you're talking about Genesis, that's completely different. I've taken Hebrew, and I've read Genesis 1 and 2.
So let me ask you this question too, because I don't see any evidence at all that supports that there needs to be a creator in order for any of these movements or these things to actually be manifesting or going. So the question is why would God need to start a universe when he could totally make it fully formed, right? Like, he could have just had it pop into existence, right? Yeah. He's all powerful. Why would he need to wait billions of years before even having a human existing?
Do a few points here. One, no matter why he did it, and this kind of thing doesn't affect whether he's there or not. But like, I'll go into it anyways. He could have done it for the sake of, we're not the only things in creation, right? Like in the Bible, and like, I guess when we talk about it, we always assume that we're the pinnacle of creation, right? Like, we're the kind of the center of the universe. We're the reason God made everything. But why do we say that?
Because it says that we're made in his image. We are. Yeah, no,
we're made in his image, but he made other things, and I'm feeling like he wasn't totally neutral to making other things. Like, when I do things, I find enjoyment in creating. And like, I'm an electrician right now. I enjoy working and doing this and that, and like, you get enjoyment from different things, right? So why not take a billion years? Why not enjoy his quote unquote time? Like, I don't see how that's bad. Like, it makes sense. If I was creating something, I would want to take my time.
But you're putting a theory of mind into God, assuming that's what his thought purposes, but you don't know that. You asked me to give. Right, but what I'm saying, what's happening here is that you're putting a theory of mind to God now. You're saying, with no evidence, not even in the Bible, saying, "Oh, well, he made this out of creation because he enjoyed it." We don't know any of that.
Well, actually, in the Bible, it does talk about how good. Like, it says, "This was good. This was good. This was good."
But from an engineering standpoint, it's one of the worst methods there can possibly be to make that much time and space. Okay, for a planet like Earth. I mean, humans can't inhabit 95% of. What is the purpose of the rest of the universe?
It all is like, okay, so it's all interconnected in the way, you know, quantum entanglement?
Yes.
Like all electrons are quantumly entangled, but the reason why you don't see weird crap happening on Earth where it's like if I hit something else will be hit in the exact same way is because the theory is that they're so far apart you will never see them, right? So maybe he created it so large so that when I touch something beside me doesn't go flying, right? Instead, something from across the universe does the exact same thing.
But he didn't have to create it that way. He didn't have to have all this time and space. He's God. He can create it any way he wants. He wouldn't need to have it quantum entanglement going for millions of billions.
Actually,
it's like creating the Empire State Building for an anthill. You don't have to do that if you're God. We have to do it because of the laws of physics, and we understand it. But he doesn't need to make the universe. It's a complete engineering nightmare what he did.
Wait, why is it okay? Well, first of all, yeah. So I think you mentioned this, but quantum entanglement is actually necessary for the universe. Like, it's not an optional thing. It needs to be there, and that's one of the when you look into these theories and stuff. Like, that's one of the first things is that quantum entanglement needs to be there.
Did God need it to be there?
Well, if he wanted to make this universe, yeah, it needs to be there. Like
what? But wait. But God is all powerful. He can make it any way he wants. He doesn't need quantum entanglement.
But if you don't include quantum entanglement, everything else would be completely different. Because he still follows, there are certain, I cannot make something, you get the idea, I can't make something that's square in a circle.
Wait. Is he God or is he not? So does he follow a set of rules? Does God have a set of rules he has to follow?
Well, things that, the rules of logic come, I'd say the things that are set, these rules that God, quote unquote, follows, it comes from God. Right?
Well,
if he's a mind, there must still be laws.
I'm just trying to understand this, Luke. Hold on.
Yeah.
He's making his own rules to follow his own rules, but he can make any rules he wants?
No, he's not making rules to follow his own rules. There are rules that are there, that are intrinsic in himself. For a mind, you can't break the rules of logic and reason, right? I can't.
But he's God. He could do whatever he wants.
Okay, now you're kind of confusing. So when we say omnipotence, the all-powerfulness, that is all-powerful to do the things that are logically possible to do. He can do all possible things. If there's something that's impossible, he can't do it because it's impossible.
Why is it impossible? What is making it impossible? What is holding that logical frame together? What is that structure making it impossible? Something had to make it impossible. If God can't do what's impossible, then there's something beyond God that's making it impossible. And what created that?
No, okay. So now there's a mistake that happens often when conversation. It's not a bad one. It just happens because we don't talk about it much, right? But when I say something is impossible, I kind of have a little contingency on it. Basically, it's impossible unless I have this thing. It's impossible for me to break this wall unless I have a hammer or something that can break through it. But that's totally different from when we talk about impossible for something to God to do, something that is completely impossible. Right? It is impossible to for something to be A and not A at the same time. That is just impossible no matter what power you have.
Why?
Why? Well, if something is A, how could it be not A? It doesn't make sense.
But it only makes sense in our universe. If it's God and he's outside of the universe,
that one would go
But what is creating the framework that doesn't allow A to be B or vice versa? Something.
No.
He's
not
God.
He can A to be A. A cannot be A and not A.
But my impression is God is all powerful. He can make the rules however he wants. Because to me, I don't believe you're a God if you don't have 100% complete control over every single thing out there. I mean, what's the purpose of saying he's a God? Because all I would need to do is figure out how to break those rules, and then I'm more powerful than God.
But you can't break the rules. If
but
you're
I'm not
talking
God.
About, so when he creates the universe, right? He creates everything in it and everything that works in it, and he's omniscient, so he knows all things because he's created all of it. All this physical stuff we see, he's created all of it. What we've said, the physical things weren't there before. Even physicists accept that. And so if that's true, if he created all these physical things, it's impossible for you to do something in the physical world that he can't do. And it's impossible for him to not be able to do something in the physical world because he created the physical world.
So there's limits to what God can do is what you're saying.
Logical limits, yes.
Why?
And I think that one's widely accepted. That one's not just me. That one's That one kind of just
I think you're the first person I've ever heard say that there's limits to what God can do.
Well, no, it's the same thing of saying, can God make a boulder too heavy for him to lift? That doesn't make sense.
But if it's God, it doesn't matter. He could create a system where it does make sense. It doesn't need to make sense to us.
Works. That's no okay. Yeah, so there are things that don't make sense to us, but that makes sense to them because he's on a different kind of level. Like he's not in the physical world; he's somewhere else. So like the idea of a Trinity doesn't make sense to me. Like I get some imagery from it. I kind of understand some things, but like unless I am on the same plane as he is, I can't understand it. Just like okay, so if you were two-dimensionals and you could see squares, you could not see a cube. But once you get to a different level, when you can see three-dimensionally, you can understand a cube. So that's the same kind of thing with the Trinity, like that kind of stuff. Okay, if I'm where he is, I'll be able to understand it better. But I'm stuck on this plane right now in this physical, spatial world, universe, so I can't understand it yet. But there are other things where it's like, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, it just doesn't make sense to be able to do this. It's impossible.
Look, speaking of physical things, can you stop tapping the desk?
Oh, sorry.
It's cool. It's just for the audio purposes. But anyway, don't let me interrupt, please.
So here's the thing. I mean, like I said, you're the first person to say that there's limits to what God can do, which in my mind, I always thought God was can do whatever. He could have created the universe however he wanted to. To me, there's parts of this universe we will never, ever, ever, ever see or be a part of that have nothing to do with us as human beings.
It does slightly with like what we've talked about. Like it's actually interconnected kind of thing.
But not really, though. I mean, it doesn't affect us. Maybe to a certain degree it does, but it doesn't to a creational standpoint. And waiting millions of billions and billions of years. What was God doing for billions of years? Just sitting there enjoying his universe?
Did we not just talk about the difference in time? God is not in. It's not like he's just in the physical universe. Like, the idea is that he permeates all through it, but like he's outside of it. He's in that thing that we've talked about where the time is different. The physicists have said that it's different. Where that area, that sphere of being is, like that's different, right? So maybe for him it wasn't billions of years.
Is that what the universe is? Is it entertainment for him? Like, what is the purpose of the universe?
Oh, okay. Well, so now we're moving away from like, is God plausible now or reasonable to now? Like, why would he do these things? And I like.
Well, you need to have the why in order to understand if it's even reasonable. Because to me, it doesn't even sound reasonable. The mental gymnastics you had to explain to me just to explain these very simple concepts.
There's no gymnastics. I use the physics and just say God started it.
But even if God started it, he did a very terrible job as an engineer. We have to create medicines to fix his problems. We have like an asteroid could come and destroy this entire planet out of nowhere. I mean, there's so many things that would cause human death. We can't even go to half the places, and it's all just for us to go to a church and worship his son that we don't even know if he ever existed. That's a huge mental gymnastics. You have to, I mean, think about everything you just said right now in this podcast. You had to jump through so many hoops just to answer that question. What makes more sense to you? Like for me, I can tell you what makes sense to me. The universe is just information and energy that has been constantly changing and adapting. And what survived is what has survived. Evolution doesn't know where it's going to end up. And at the most basic molecular level, the ones that came together, the ones that fought and destroyed the other ones were the ones that kept going on. And it finally led to a point where we as human beings have developed the cognitive abilities to be able to understand we are groups of cells, we are groups of neurons, we are groups of molecules that have to feed off of other energy in order to survive. It's a survival mechanism that's got us here. And what's more likely, that it's all these mental gymnastics where it's art and entertainment and then it's the universe, or that we as human beings have told stories for thousands of years about a lot of gods because we didn't understand how the universe worked. The universe doesn't have a meaning or a purpose. It makes way more sense that the universe has no meaning and no purpose to it. It just evolves into what works. That's why stars die and are born and are brought back together again. There is no purpose to the actual universe. That scares a lot of people. So they create stories. Bro, I'm a filmmaker, bro. I know stories. I know what's the Star Wars, Harry Potter. We've been telling stories for thousands of years. We tell kids childhood stories. That's how we've learned. Mm-hmm. What's more plausible, honestly?
Okay, well, like, and I get where you're coming from, and I know what you're saying, but it seems it's a little bit weird to me. Like, first of all, I think whenever I talk to someone, usually like an atheist, you always throw in evolution. Evolution is how we got here. Well, evolution isn't how we got here. Evolution was like, for us, as humans, when we were on Earth, the biology, yeah, we evolved into humans, but like evolution happened on Earth. There's a lot of things that happened before that. And you're talking about all these gymnastics I went through. I used the exact same physics as you, and all I said was God started it because how could information start itself? And you didn't answer that. And so I've given a reasonable answer to it. But one thing I wanted to talk about, just so we're on the same page,
answer.
What do you mean by, what do we mean by reasonable?
No, wait a minute, Luke. You keep saying you gave a reasonable answer. You didn't. You couldn't answer it. How did he start the information?
No, he didn't start the information. He was the information.
So it's okay to already have the. So what started God?
And no, so this is the difference. I'm not fighting that something couldn't already be existing. I'm fighting that if that thing that it was already existing wasn't conscious, it couldn't change into something completely different.
Why
For example,
not?
Our universe.
Why not?
Because there's nothing that move. Like, it's weird to say move because there's no space in that place. But like, you know what I'm saying? There's nothing that caused it. It can't be self-causing if it's not conscious.
Why? Why does it have to be conscious? Give me the evidence that something has to be conscious in order for it to be created.
Well, not to be created, but to change, to do something with itself.
But there's things in this universe that do that without consciousness, right? Rocks change, planets change, stars explode.
All started from one big thing, right? So it's like these things are moving because something first pushed it. Like,
yeah,
even the
what makes
physicists
it
understand
conscious,
that. Like,
Luke, that's what I'm trying to get at. Why does it have to be consciousness? Give me the connection to consciousness and moving material matter.
Not material matter. Like, okay, yeah. So even before the material matter, something changed this immaterial matter.
How?
What changes in material matter?
How did it happen? Give me the specifics. I want the blueprint of how that happened.
I'm going to give you the only logical way, unless you can give me a logical way it happens. Like, the idea is we should both come from an agnostic points, and we both give our own burden of proof. My proof is that there is nothing that just causes itself to change unless something first pushed it, unless that thing had ability to think and act upon itself.
But you haven't demonstrated why that first cause needs to come from a conscious mind.
Well, and just the way we have ever seen reality, something like there has to be a cause to it, right? Like when I think I'm going to move my hand, it's because some neurons fired in my brain, and those and then you keep going back. Okay, what made me do that? Are you determinist, or are you deterministic, or are you more libertarian on how things happen? Like, where do you come from?
I don't know. I actually don't know my position on that when it comes to the definitions of it. Like determinist, I don't believe in free will.
Yeah.
I'm pretty determinist on a lot of stuff. Yeah, there are some questions I still have of whether that's true or not, so I can't give you a definitive answer. But for the most part, I am into determinism because every action creates a reaction, and it doesn't require a conscious mind in order to do that. Because there's things we do, and there's things that happen in the universe that don't require consciousness for it to actually happen.
No, but that's because there was an action before that. You get that? You said every action is a reaction.
So there was this action, and all of a sudden, the action was, I'm going to make a program, and it's just going to self-replicate itself into its own existence. So he basically started at the beginning with his computer program, basically put it in existence and let it run itself. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think he intervenes in it, but yeah,
even though he could have made it fully formed program. When I make a computer graphics program, if I do anything with a game, I could have fully formed the computer program straight out the gate. I didn't need to wait for billions of years or anything else like that. He could have fully formed it. So why didn't he fully form it?
Okay, so
because in the Bible he did. In the Bible, he says, God created man, and it was fully formed. So, but we have evidence to support that it's not how man evolved. So why didn't he make it fully formed?
Okay, so now I'll touch on both of them. One, with the thing in the Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, it's super poetic. Like, if you read the Hebrew, it sounds beautiful. Like, it's good, right? But it's not trying to be a science textbook, because in chapter 1 and chapter 2 they say it differently. In the first one, they put humans as the pinnacle, right? They're trying to say there's an order, like importance of things. Humans are the top. Like, this is the pinnacle of God's creation. So it's making a point. It's not trying to say this is how things actually happen. It's just in poetry you do that. You don't know. You're not always trying to make sense. You're just trying to get across a certain meaning, right? It doesn't have to be true. It's just you're getting across meaning.
We got 5 minutes left. You guys want to just do your final points, and
I guess
we can
the
wrap
final
up?
question I have with that, maybe you can just answer this briefly. It seems weird that a creation that could do all this scientific stuff, including making an entire universe, which if you ever do 3D graphics, you can realize how simple iterations can come from simplicity that don't require a mind to do, honestly. It just seems interesting that he knows all these physics, he knows all this geometry, he knows all this like trigonometry, whatever, but then wanted to write a book of poetry for us to understand it. That just seems absurd to me. Like, and the chances are that a fictional book that was written thousands of years ago, and we as human beings have been writing stories for thousands and thousands of years, okay? And we still write stories like Star Wars and Harry Potter. It's the same journey of the hero story, that is what's true, but not that the energy of the universe has always existed and that it has transformed itself after billions and billions and billions of years. Evolution is the most probable reason of how we got to where we're at, and there's no requirement for a God in any of that explanation anywhere.
All right, and I've totally loved being on this podcast with you and talking to you. I think it's been a great conversation. But again, I just think it's important to reiterate that, one, I think it's really realistic that God would have written it in poetry. If you look at who God is through the biblical narrative, he's an interesting guy. It's not like he's going to be telling people thousands of years ago that quantum entanglement and this and that are how it happens. No one's going to understand. He's going to speak on to their level, like he's always done and will always do. As people learn more, he shows more. But now I also want to focus on the fact that I have given a reason to and an explanation of how my worldview might work. And I know we didn't have much time, but I didn't get the chance to hear how in an atheistic worldview that it makes sense that in a place where there's no space, no time, no physical objects, no nothing, that this information could have changed itself into a 3D dimensional universe with material space and time in a different form without any consciousness. And you've talked about evolution, but that really makes no sense at all, because evolution has nothing to do with the start of the universe. And I know
it makes perfect sense. The entire universe is one big evolution. It's all information that's constantly changing and adapting. It's a feedback loop. That makes way more sense. Think about it. Think about what I'm saying here. The entire universe from the beginning of anything, actually the information's always been there, but it's always evolved because it has to move. It's in space and time, right? So
it's not in space and time. Like before, it's not in space and time, so it doesn't have to move. That's my whole point. It's not move. Like, forget about space and time. Like, the space isn't there. It's not moving.
But
like
we live in a space and time continuum, and the reality is yeah. But the reality is if the information. But you're asking the question. What I'm trying to make clear here is if the information was always there and it was changing, it can change. Universes could
pop. Who said it was changing? Who said it was changing in the beginning?
It has to change.
Why?
That's the only thing that is consistent in the universe is change. Everything, nothing stays still.
In our universe,
nothing.
Yes.
Even a ball sitting there is not staying still. We're moving through space and time constantly. Molecules are constantly changing.
That's my
nothing
whole point. We're in space
still.
and time now. It wasn't there before. And that's going to be the hardest thing for us humans to understand. But the physicists are trying to do it through math and all that. There wasn't space and time before. It's not like these things were just moving. There was no movement.
You're saying there's a God that lives outside of space and time. He can beat all these laws of physics, but you believe that, but don't have any explanation for what that is, how it is, and what it happened. But you can't say particles or energy can't be without space and time and change into information. That doesn't make any sense.
No,
it makes zero sense.
No, the physicists say there's no. Like, I don't know what you mean. I don't make any sense. Like, I'm talking about what the physicists.
You said that there's a specialized whatever space and time, some special time that you have no evidence for. First off, you have no mathematics for that God lives in, and you believe in that. Yet you even told me, and you can go back in the podcast and listen. You don't have the evidence of how it happened, but that same thing of energy or information outside of space and time that is constantly there and changing and moving. It could have created multiple universes. There could be other universes that do exist out there that we don't know about as well.
Well, but I think it's important to say I'm not making this stuff up. It's not like I just came up with it last night. I'm just saying what the physicists are coming up with. So it's not like it's my ideas. I'm telling you what I've read and what I've looked into and how it fits with my worldview. And so, like, it's not some crazy thing. I'm just saying what the physicists said. Yeah, the particles weren't there before. There was something before that. And even if you don't look at the holographic universe theory, other theories even say that the particles weren't there. They're made up of one-dimensional, I forget, rings or whatever. Like there's a lot of theories that we should look into together. We can have a podcast just on that. But I think
But the difference between me and you, Luke, is that you have to actually come up with the evidence to support what it is that your theory is, and yours lacks even more evidence than mine does.
Why don't you need to come up with evidence? Because you're making
I do. I'm basing off of what we know about evidence. You're coming up with hypotheses that fit your worldview. You're saying,
I
oh,
did
a
come up
conscious
with
mind
it.
needs
But
to
that's
be.
what the physicist said.
No, you're saying the conscious mind has to be. You're putting
That's
an absolute,
okay. That one's philosophy. That one's different.
but you're
So-
putting an absolute that you don't have any. You have zero evidence that a conscious mind has to create or make or move anything. You have no evidence that a conscious mind is the only possibility that can make something move in the universe or create something. There's no evidence to support your argument. And if it is, give me the best. You have 1 minute right now to give me your best evidence for how a conscious mind can actually do that.
Well, I know what you're saying. Yeah, I've made some statements like the conscious mind, and I put a little bit behind it, but I didn't do it justice nearly enough for you to believe me, and I get that. And I know you have to leave in a minute. I'm not going to answer in a minute, but I think we should have another podcast where we dive into this, because this one's more philosophy than physics. I would love to get into philosophy with you, but I'm not going to do it in a minute. That wouldn't do it justice.
Fair enough. I mean, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
But I've really enjoyed talking to you. I love where you come from and what's going on.
Well, thanks for talking with me. I appreciate it, Luke.
Yeah.
I mean,
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on today. Everybody can find Reasons to Believe in a Virus Called Fear and the Ben Fama Show on the Ben Fama Jr. YouTube channel and at, what's the website?
benfamajr.com.
Luke, thanks again, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Robert. Hopefully I see you again soon.
Thank you to Luke and Ben. Thank you to Dave Blair at DaveBlairMusic.com. Thank you to Feedspot.com for promoting the Right to Reason to the top 10 atheist podcast. Thank you to our patrons, Jason Parker, Freethinker215, Alan Marks, Philip Spawn, Bernard Lamberell, Enema Man, Larry Wilson, and our top supporter, Rob Montgomery. You can support this broadcast at patreon.com/right and learn more at therighttoreason.com. Next week, we're talking to author Edward Steller about his new book, National Lottery, that examines the evils of religion and the distractions of politics through a story of the vulnerability of the human condition. Between now and then, remember that you have the right to reason.
Hey!